Well, we are live. Let me just go to the channel real quick. Let me wait till a number comes up to see how many we have waiting. This was not announced. This was as last minute as actually when I decided to do it, that's when I texted you and said, "Hey, let's go." So that's how well planned this was.
When George Bruno says, "Let's go live," you go live.
You go live.
That's the way it works.
You go live. Yeah. So, all right. Well, we are live. I just want to introduce my friend Tony Merkel to the audience. Hello, my friends. Good afternoon. It is 3:53 p.m. I decided to bring Tony on. He was the creator of the video that I put out yesterday, Rage Against Dystopia. And you are the guy, you're the voice behind the Confessionals Podcast.
Yeah.
So people can see the face behind the voice of the Confessionals Podcast. Our backstory is this, that you were actually a barbershop client of mine several years ago.
Strategically.
Yeah. And that was really cool. And then we have some commonality. I believe your wife worked. Does she still work for the university?
No, she quit about, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, but we both went to school there.
Okay, excellent. Yeah. And I had graduated from there back in the 80s. And so that was kind of a cool thing that we discovered that we had in common. That was kind of cool. Since then, you've started a podcast called The Confessionals.
Yep.
And why don't you just I don't like introducing people when people can do it themselves. Introduce yourself, give us a little backstory, and tell us what The Confessionals is. Go for it.
All right. I tend to be long-winded. I'm a podcaster, so forgive me. But
go for it.
So let me start off with how you played in this, because you actually played a big role in the beginning of everything. I was a huge Duck Dynasty fan. I decided I wanted to grow a big beard. And this is just
this is great.
And so at the time of my life, I was involved in the idea of paranormal, the Bigfoot stuff, especially Bigfoot. I was really heavily involved in trying to, gather people's stories and just see what's what with that. And I come across your YouTube channel one day because I'm trying to figure out how to take care of this stupid beard. And you were talking about whatever I tuned in for. And I started going through some of your other videos, and you did a lot of motivational stuff. And I know you remember this when you used to put the camera on your mirror in the car. Yes. And you'd be driving around. And so I'd be watching this, and then I saw the roads that you were on, and I'm like, wait a second. Did that sign just say what I thought it said? And it started connecting dots. And I was like, this guy's local to me. And right there, I was like, holy crap. So I'm watching your videos. I'm learning how to take care of my beard from you. And I said, I got to figure out where this guy works. And I found out the shop you were at, and I made an appointment to come in and to sit down with you. And between the time I discovered you and the time I sat down with you, just you being who you are on YouTube. And at that time, I think you had like 20,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
And it was like, it wasn't anything what it is now. And 20,000 is great. I mean, it's still great. But I was like, man, if this guy can do what he does, I can do the same thing, and because I used to think like my ship had sailed, I was, I don't know, 30 years old. And I was like, man, I'm a truck driver. And I just, life has passed me by. And
we love truck drivers on this channel. We love truck drivers. A lot of truck drivers listen to me.
Really?
They send me videos. Yes, a lot of truckers are fans of this channel.
Then let me pause my story and just do some self-promotion here. I got a podcast for you. Me and my dad started a second podcast this year called Hammer Lane Legends, where we talk to truckers about the wild experiences from the road. And people can check that out, Hammer Lane Legends. But
nice.
So I decided, you know what, I'm going to start a YouTube channel. But what am I going to talk about? Well, I had this Facebook group I had started called Pennsylvania Sasquatch Research. I no longer run it. Started a YouTube channel, and I started just doing what you do. I was putting my camera, my phone on my mirror, driving to work, talking about Bigfoot, and, and people loved it. And what happened was, I have a friend now. He's one of my best friends now. He runs a podcast, the biggest Bigfoot podcast in the world. It's called Sasquatch Chronicles, and he contacted me.
I know it.
Wes is a great guy, and he contacted me one day. And I was just back in my truck and at work, and I get a FaceTime call from him on Facebook. I'm like, I never talked to this guy my entire life. What is this about? I answered the phone. We talked for about 45 minutes, and he's inspiring me. He's telling me, like, listen, you should start a podcast, and you should just talk about everything, because like I'm into the paranormal. I'm a Christian, so I have a different perspective on things. And I started the podcast, and I just started running. So I always, whenever I talk about the beginning of what I do, it's always George Bruno and Wes Germer. And that's how we started the Confessionals Podcast, which is, you know, what we do now, where it's all paranormal, Bigfoot. I consider Bigfoot, UFOs, all that stuff paranormal. And so what I do is I interview people on their experiences, firsthand experiences. These are just everyday people that contact me, and we bring them on the show and we talk about it. And sometimes I do little monologues, like I shared with you and you shared with your audience yesterday. Rage Against Dystopia is a new Instagram page I started that strictly focuses on historical conspiracy, but more current events as to what is happening in the world today and what does it mean for our future. Because I personally believe, this is pessimistic, but I believe that we're on the road to a dystopian future, and I'm trying to expose it by what's happening today and how that's leading to what's coming tomorrow. So we started that recently. And I've just been all over the place, man. I just do a lot of stuff. I love life, and I pursue it to the fullest extent.
I love that. You know, it was in, I guess I was at I was working in the mall, which I hate working in a mall. I couldn't stand working retail. And I used to say, I work in a damn mall. I used to say that all the time, and I hated it. But it was a high-end kind of place. It was a great place for me to practice my trade. And it was a decent company. I enjoyed it. And I had been a commercial actor and voiceover guy for 25 years. It was a great part-time gig, over 350 commercials, narrations, audiobooks, voices of websites and things like that for many, many years. And I thought, you know what? Rather than working for someone else, why don't I work for myself? And I gave myself an 18 to 24 month goal to get out of that particular barbershop in the mall. And I started my channel, and I started taking advice from people who left the retail world, who left the 9-to-5 world. And within it was less than 2 years, I was making enough money on YouTube where I could actually, leave cutting hair. And then I was doing well. And then year and a half, 2 years ago, I got demonetized. And
didn't know that.
Just for being, because I tend to be a little more conservative. I tend to, I'm a Christian guy. So, and I have a little bit of a temper and things like that. So, that's why and literally just the money went poof. And it was like getting fired from a job, literally with no warning. It was like getting a pink slip. And I thought, oh, crap. So I had to go back into cutting hair again, full time. And I did that. And I've been working my way back up. I used to do all my videos with cigars and pipes and a glass of bourbon and all this kind of stuff. And anything that has tobacco, alcohol, firearms, you can't monetize. So literally, and at that time, I probably had 1,000 videos. I did about 1,000 shows. Every single one demonetized. Gone. So that put me into a state of shock. And it's not the kind of thing where you can collect unemployment.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that. So now I'm building myself back up again and going to build a coaching business. I'm cutting hair again. I'm working for an institution right now. So, I have like several several jobs. But my goal was not to be interrupted. Nothing was going to knock me off of my goal. I don't care what came at me. The last thing I want to do is work for someone. Can't stand it. And I know you were talking about for a while, early on with the confessionals, you love trucking, you love your work, but it would be nice if you could do the confessionals in place of that, or maybe decrease your days or something like that. Tell me about how far you've come along with that goal, and what's it look like? Because we could not predict COVID. Right. We could not predict lockdowns. So there have been a lot of curveballs thrown at you and I that we didn't expect, things that we had no control over. Tell me about career-wise, what's happening with the confessionals, the bumps that you experienced, and where you're at now.
Well, definitely felt it that last year in 2020. And so when I started the podcast, because I was kind of shy about it. I was like, man, am I really going to do this? Like, this is a big step. I had the experience with audio production. I messed around with music stuff, like producing, recording people and stuff in college. So I had an idea of how to do it. I had some studio equipment already, so that wasn't a problem. But the idea of venturing out, putting yourself out there in a public way, and pursuing a goal and a dream. The dream for me was to do it full time, make it a career, and be more present for my life and underneath this roof. And so when I started out, I called my dad and I talked to him about it, and I said, I'm thinking about doing this, and he told me something I'll never forget. Now, my dad drives for the truck for the same company I do. He's in the Allentown terminal. I'm in the Norristown terminal, and we talked, and he said to me, Tony, even if you do this and it even gets you out of your job for a year, I would tell you 100% go for it, because you can't buy that time back. And coming from a guy who's been driving truck for around 30 years now, I think 23, 24 years at the same company, that meant a lot to me, because he knows. I mean, he spent his entire adult life in a truck behind the wheel. And don't get us wrong, like, we enjoy driving. Like, I'd find something else to do if I hated it. But it's not the passion. I enjoy it. I like being out on the road by myself. It gives me a lot of time to think and consume content and learn stuff. But it's not the passion. And so right there, I decided, you know what, I'm going to do this. And so in the beginning of all this,
so was that the pivot point right there? Because everybody has a pivot point where they say, you know what, making a decision to go this way instead of that way. Was that the point right there? Was that chat with your dad? Was that when you said, that's it, I'm going to set this new goal?
Yeah, 100%. My dad has raised me in a way where he always told me when I was a kid growing up, and as an adult, he reaffirmed this. He said, I'm always going to tell you what I think, but it's your decision what you want to do. And I was 17 when I graduated high school. Once I graduated high school, he treated me like an adult. He's like, these are what bills look like. Go pay them. Figure it out. And so he just always treated me like, this is your life, your decisions and stuff. But because the way he approached me my entire life with that idea, it always made me feel comfortable going to him and just asking him for advice, because I know he's not expecting me to, do what he tells me to do. It was just a matter of, I needed an outside opinion of somebody who loves me, cares about me, wants the best for me, and hear what they had to say. So when he said that to me, I was like, I'm doing this. And right away, I jumped in both feet. I would work all day long. Now, I don't work as many hours as I used to, but I mean, it's still obviously a full-time job, but I was doing like 12 to 14 hours a day behind the wheel. And then I would come home, and we didn't have any kids at the time. My wife got pregnant 3 months after I started the show. And I would come home, kiss her, eat dinner, and then I'd go into the third bedroom of the house. And that's where I had the studio set up at the time. And I would work on podcasting until about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I treated it like it was a full-time job, and I did it relentlessly for the first year, because my son was born in December. So the first year we didn't have any kids, and I worked my tail off. And I pull a lot of inspiration from different people. And one of the things that Rogan, I listened to Rogan, not a ton, but at times, he was talking to a fellow comedian, and he said that they were talking about how they create stuff. And he said that, this was early on in the show, he said that when he's trying to write, he sometimes he doesn't, a lot of times he doesn't know where he's going with it, but he just sits himself down in front of a pad in his creative environment, and he just goes, because he said you have to put yourself in a creative environment to do anything. And so that's kind of how I approached the podcast, where it's just like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like I know audio, but I could get better at it. But as far as building a company, building a podcast, building a platform where people want to come to me, I have no idea, but I got to try. And so I put myself in that creative position to try stuff. And I was just pretty much throwing mud against the wall, seeing what sticks, listening to people tell me, or not to me, but listening to videos and podcasts on how to do certain things. And sometimes I would spend 2-3 hours trying to figure out one thing on how to tweak my audio to get it to what I want it to be. And it was constant all the time. And in the beginning, George, you might, be able to understand this. In the beginning, I lost friends throughout this. There were people in my life that were good friends of mine, and they're like, what are you doing? Like, you don't ever call, you don't ever hang out. You're constantly talking about this podcast. And what are you talking about? Bigfoot? Like, what are you doing? And you know what I mean? But I had a vision, and it wasn't Bigfoot. My vision wasn't Bigfoot. My vision was the logo on the wall behind me. It was a podcast where people came to hear my show, whatever I talked about that week. And I just went off on it for the first year, and went crazy, and people started listening to the podcast. And then over time, and this is, years later, but over time, as I had more success, and obviously I'm successful with it, those friends, most of them have come back around like, I get it now. They get it. And it's living by example. I mean, in the moment, you have to be willing to stand in the face of it all and say, I get it. You don't get it, because you and me, we're not on the same level as far as where we vision things. I think 5-10 years down the road. And what's really cool is to see it all come back around, where now the success has come, and the people that were in my life, they saw it all unfold, and they're like, I get it. Now I understand why you weren't hanging out all the time. And now I understand why the phone calls just dropped off, because you were busy. And it's like, I'm not playing games with this. This isn't like a high school kid starting a YouTube channel about whatever, which I encourage, by the way. But well, maybe not YouTube, but I don't know. But, the fact is, I didn't care what people thought. I just was going to do what I envisioned. And honestly, a side note to all that is, sometimes things are born out of desperation. Lindsay, my wife, worked at the college that we all went to, and she was miserable. She was miserable. And behind the scenes, the leadership wasn't great, and I have no problem saying that. And her life was miserable. And one day she came home from work. It was a Friday night. I come home. Obviously, I'm later than her, and she's in the kitchen and she's crying by herself. I'm like, let me guess, work again, because it was a constant theme. And at the time at work, we were rebidding to get new territories. And at the time I was working a 9:30 shift starting there, and it was more local. I really wasn't working a ton of hours, but she was working full time. We were good. And I told her, I said, quit your job. And she said, we can't afford it. I mean, the student loan bills are through the roof. I mean, anybody who's gone to private college understands that. And I told her, quit your job. I'm going to take an on-call start, which means I would start at 6 o'clock every morning most of the time. And I'd work easily 12, 14 hours a day, every day. And I said, quit your job. I'm going to take care of it. And she's like, we can't. I said, listen, I'm going to quit my job. Or no, you're going to quit your job. How did I say it? I'm sorry, I'm messing this up. I told her, I'm going to take that bid at work. And so I'm going to pile on more hours to myself. I'm going to do that. If you don't quit your job, we're going to have an issue. And so at that point, I gave her that ultimatum. So she quit her job. She's much happier. Now she's a full-time mom. But in that moment, I didn't totally understand where finances were going to go. But I was about maybe 6 months to a year into that lifestyle with her and I, no kids. And I could see the writing on the wall. The trucking job was not going to keep it all afloat, especially once kids came. And so that desperation of understanding, if I don't do something on the side, I'm going to lose my house. and that's obviously not a good thing. So that was also, I think, a driving factor for the podcast and how hard I worked at the beginning, because I knew as a truck driver, I can't just say, oh yeah, I'll get a part-time job, I'll start at 6 o'clock in the evening. I'm still working in the truck driving business at that time, and I don't know when I'm going to get done. So I can't just get a part-time job. I had to generate an income on the side that I built so that I don't have to worry about punching a clock. And podcasting was born for me.
That's incredible. So far, starting your own podcast, is it everything that you thought it was going to be? Have there been any surprises? Tell us about starting your own podcast business, because I have a lot of creative people that follow me. And, there's the kind of people, before there were podcasts, everybody wanted to write a book. Everybody I know, I should write a book. Gee, I should write a book. No one ever wrote a book. Now it's like, gee, I should have my own podcast. And you don't realize how hard it is until you're actually doing it. Tell me about how it has fulfilled your dreams. Tell me how it has let you down, some of the challenges of having a podcast.
I would say, and I know you know about this, because we were talking about it before we went live, and dealing with the trolls was a very big part. Because I don't think like that. Not one time in my life of listening to podcasts did I ever email a podcast and tell them how much I hate them because they don't think about those the way you think about them. Like the idea of dealing with people who just are on the internet viciously just to be a vicious person was so foreign to me. When people told me, oh, you got to watch out for the trolls, I'm like, what are you talking about? It's not that big of a deal, until it became a big deal. I had people, as the show was growing, I had people really wanting to talk to me, and they would go online and pay like, I don't know, $10-15 for my personal information. And I would get phone calls at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And, it's like, listen, you want to be on my show. This is not the way to do it. In fact, we're never going to talk again because you did this. Like I was heated, and I tend to have a temper too. Like I don't like putting up with BS. And so I had to change my phone number a couple times since I started the show. And now I operate with 2 different phones. So I actually hand out a phone number to people for specifically the business side of things to help, nullify that. But people got nasty. And one of the things for me, and this is, I guess, a personal thing for me, I'm Puerto Rican, and I know I got the lights on right now, but, in normal lighting, I'm a pretty tan guy year round.
Yeah, you are.
And because I had a long beard, and I would shave my head because I'm losing my hair. So people are like, well, don't shave your head. Well, listen, I'm losing my hair. I don't want to look like a goof. Like, I mean, it is what it is. People would say that I look like a terrorist. And I
got the same thing too when my hair was black. Same thing.
When it first happened, that was my reaction. I laughed. I'm like, that's hilarious. That's hilarious. After a while, it weighed on you. And then when you start seeing people saying it to be mean, not just joking around, like I can take a joke, but to be mean, to pull you down, and they're doing it all the time, it weighs you down, where it got to the point where I wasn't receiving enough love from the people who love my show, which I knew people loved my show. I saw the numbers, but I was getting hammered by people trolling me all the time. And the balance of the love coming in versus the hate coming in was so offset. I started having a panic attack the one day in my truck, and I had to pull it over, and I was like, I'm losing it. Like I'm thinking, I'm just going to listen. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm just going to quit this show because I can't handle this. This is crazy. And sometimes when I say that, I feel kind of wimpy in a way, like, come on, just buck up and handle it. But it's the overtime pressure of it, of people constantly hating on you. And with what I do as a Christian, doing a podcast that's on the paranormal, well, when I'm having a conversation with somebody, they're telling me their experience, especially if they're Christian on that end, and they bring it up and we start talking along those theological lines, I got thousands of people who do not agree with me on that. And some of them are very nasty about it. And so like, it just got so much to me and so personal that I was like, I gotta change something here. And I thought about quitting the show, to be honest with you. And then over time, because when those things would happen, I would listen to different people. Gary Vaynerchuk was one of them that I would tune into to just kind of understand how to deal with the online world. And I thankfully I didn't quit the job or the show, but that was, I think, one of the biggest challenges. And if I could go back on it, in all honesty, if I could go back and redo it all again, I would start the show. I would do pretty much everything the same. Well, not everything, but one of the things I would change is my name publicly. I would have like a pen. I would be, hey, I'm dark and you guys want to, say stuff. So let's call me Juan Diaz or something like that. Because
right.
That way, I'm untraceable. You can't find my number. And when I'm not on the microphone, I'm not existent. And that's one thing I probably would have changed, is because it gets to be a little bit much. But all in all, you learn to navigate the waters or you bail. And that's why people, they reach out to me a lot. How do I start a podcast? You inspired me to start a podcast, this, that, and the other. And I tell them exactly what I did. I don't tell them, oh, check out, this video or something like that. I tell them exactly what I did. And most of the time, 90% of them don't even start. And the ones that do, they bail, and the ones that remain, they're my allies because I help them. It's a win-win-win for me.
So what would you say is the secret for longevity in the podcast business?
The secret, preparation is huge. One of the biggest things I hear when I talk to other podcasters is they live on a week-to-week basis. And I was doing that in the beginning of the show, until I talked to another podcaster, and I can't remember the life of me what her name was, but it was just real short, in passing. But she said that she always has 25 interviews in the bank. And I was like, 25 interviews? Holy crap. And so I pulled pieces from different people, and I pulled that, and I said, I need at least 25 in the bank at all times. And so I started going through my emails and finding all these emails from people that I missed, that I just didn't see it. And that's when I pulled my wife into the operation. She helps now, where she handles my social media. She handles the emails because she's much more
nice.
organized.
So you're not outsourcing that. You're keeping the money in the family, so to speak.
Yeah.
I kind of like that. I like that. That's really smart. Tell me about how you get interviews. How do you, you started with an interest in the paranormal, and which of course naturally I think leads to interest in conspiracies and that type of thing.
Yeah.
How do you get that? How do you get those guests? Do they just pop out of the woodwork? Do they reach out to you? Do you research them? What do you?
Yeah.
How do people come forward?
Well, they do now. They do now. I don't really need to look for anybody anymore. But in the beginning, and this is what I tell people in podcast that want a podcast, in the beginning, you got to find other shows that are in existence. It doesn't matter what size they are. They have more numbers than you. And you ask them if, tell them who you are. Would they be interested in doing a swap cast where, that we both broadcast it on our platforms? Or would you bring me on for an interview? Could I bring you on for an interview? Do things like that. And cross promotion is huge. And getting access to their audience, that's the currency right there. You know, like in the beginning, you're not chasing money. You're not chasing Bitcoin. You're not chasing any of that. What you're chasing is the currency of attention. And so I was fortunate that I had a Bigfoot group that I started on Facebook. We had 1,200 people in it. And of the 1,200, maybe 100 tuned in the beginning, right? But I did have access to some kind of an audience. But what I did was I reached out to other podcasts. My friend Wes on Sasquatch Chronicles, he brought me on his show, which was very helpful. But getting access to other people's audience, but also preparation going into that. You don't just show up and be like, hi, I'm Tony and I have a podcast. It's called The Confessionals. I would love for you to listen. Bye. You actually perform. You bring the alacrity to the whole conversation, so that when you're on somebody else's platform, people are so intrigued by you that they're willing to go and look you up, subscribe, and listen. See, those are a lot of steps. It's easy to talk about, but to get somebody that's listening to a podcast, they tune into it because they love the show. You're a guest. You got to get them to fall in love with you within the 30 to hour minute time frame, whatever it is, on their platform, and have them after that show be so interested not to listen to their next favorite podcast, but to go look you up, subscribe, and give you a chance. So you can't just show up and bring it just, well, I'm here and you got a lot of people and, hopefully they show up. You got to try, you got to bring it. And so when I would go and do things on other people's shows and stuff, I was obsessed with trying to be the best version possible. And it's not that hard for me. I'm very charismatic, and I got the gift of gab. I learned that from my dad, by the way. When I was a kid growing up, every day of my life, I'd come home from school, you sit down at the table, you eat dinner, and you sit there and you talk with the same four people every freaking day until dad went to go drive his truck at night. And then you got to go and do whatever you wanted to do. So you learn how to have a conversation with people, the same people every day. And so I got that from my dad. And I just, listen, when you're starting this, you got to grind, and you take the show that you come out with episode 1 and you're posting it in Facebook groups, and those Facebook groups, you get 1-2 likes, but it's 1 or 2 more than you had the day before. And then that one post sits in that Facebook group for all eternity, and people are coming into that Facebook group and they start seeing it, and you start slowly building up the momentum. And it's like that snowball. The hardest thing is to get that freaking thing rolling. Once it starts rolling down that hill, good luck trying to stop it. Listen, it's got a mind of its own. It's going to roll. You just gotta steer it. It's that grind to get there. And George, what is it? It's like, when you're building a business, I think they say like the first 10% is the hardest to get to. And once you hit that like 10% point, it just skyrockets. Yeah. And that's what I picture in my head when I'm building my show. And to honestly, people who podcast that podcast in the same industry or whatever, if they saw my numbers, like they'd be like, you're skyrocketing. And I'm like, I'm not there yet. Like, I know what I want. And so my 10%, I haven't hit my 10% yet. And so I'm still in that grind mode. I mean, it's Sunday. You text me last minute to come on here. I was already down here working since 6 o'clock this morning. I was supposed to have 2 interviews today with my dad for Hammer Lane Legends, but we canceled because of the snow. So I took the opportunity to work all day and then spend the evening with my family. And so that's the kind of grind you do to build what you want to build. There's always something to do if you actually want to, be the best version of you as possible. So what you're not saying is that somebody came to you and said, we'd love to hire you for $2,500 a week. We will pay you that much to do a podcast. You're going to get full health benefits, short-term and long-term disability, and we'll give you 6 weeks vacation every year. That didn't happen? No, and I wouldn't take it if they offered it. I'm not interested in working for somebody else. And I know my value. Rush Limbaugh, years ago when I was a kid, I remember this because my dad talked about it, and that's why I know this. Years ago, Rush signed probably the biggest radio contract ever. I think it was like $400,000 a year or something like that.
That was a big deal.
Yeah. And when he signed it in an interview, he was asked, "Are you worth that money?" And he said, "I'm worth what they're willing to pay me." And so for me, it was just like this idea that I know what I'm worth, and I know what others are willing to pay me. And if that doesn't match up, I'm not even interested. And most of the time it isn't. I mean, listen, it's the same thing with this stimulus money and stuff that everybody's talking about. Like, I'm not a huge fan of the stimulus at all. Never was, never will be. You know what I'm a fan of? Opening the freaking economy back up and let people be the best version of them as possible and make the economy move again. So what's $600 going to take you? What's $1,200, $2,000? What's that going to do?
New flat screen. You're going to get a new flat screen for $546 at Walmart.
And even if you're struggling, even if you're in a position where you're really struggling and stuff, you got to think 5 years down the road. Most people, they don't make just $2,000 a year, but you're going to trade in the future of your lineage. Like, we're printing money out of thin air and taking it from people that don't even exist yet. Your lineage, your kids are going to pay back the debt because you couldn't figure things out and you took $2,000. And I'm not blaming the people because we don't even have a choice in this. Like, they're going to deposit the money in my account whether I want them to or not. What I'm blaming is the government for being so nearsighted, but they lull the masses to sleep and they don't want you to wake up. So they just keep feeding you crumbs off the plate you already paid for. We already paid for all this. And they're just feeding us crumbs to keep us satisfied because most people are useful idiots. I'm sorry, that got off track, but I'm sorry.
That's all right. We have a question here. Michael Finn from Brazil says, how long have you been doing your podcast?
I started January 19th, 2017. Was the very first episode. I know it's not on the screen, but I have a a jersey hanging on my wall. One of my listeners makes hockey jerseys, and they made me the Confessionals jersey. It's real sweet, and he put on the shoulders Pennsylvania, like the picture of Pennsylvania with the date that we started the show, and I'll never forget it. January 19th, 2017. So we're going on 4 years this month.
Another question, Drew Baumhauer says, do you think we're going to get any worthwhile information from the Pentagon in the next 180 days?
I'm not hopeful. And even if they give out information, I question it all. I look at what they're doing over the last, and people don't realize this, but it's been since 2017 that the government's been admitting about UFOs. It's just people didn't pay attention in 2017 because they were too busy about Russiagate. And so they just glossed over it. And all of a sudden, I think it was 2018, 2019, the same videos that came out in 2017 went viral. Everybody's like, oh my gosh, look at these UFOs. And I'm just like, we've already been here, guys. And then after that, they came out this year in the middle of the pandemic, and they said that we have crafts in our possession that were not made here on Earth. And nobody even flinched at it. And because we're all preoccupied. So what I'm looking at it as is, what is the point? Why are the government just doesn't release information? They like, we have a long history of global governments, but our government alone, they don't just tell you things that really don't do them any good. What's the good? What's the point of them telling us this stuff now in the middle of a crazy world we're living in? Why are they saying now in 180 days they're going to drop all the information they have? Well, one, I don't think they're going to drop all the information they have, and two, I would question the information that they do drop as being authentic. And if it is authentic, why? Why is it authentic? If they're really dropping information, what are they trying to distract us from? And that's what I tell everybody. You got to watch your six. When they're pointing in this direction and say, look over here, look at this, it's amazing. Look over there, because they're doing something they don't want you to see. And so when it comes to the 180-day thing, I'm very skeptical. But we'll see what happens. It's going to be good content for me either way. So I'm fine with it.
Yeah. Should Julian Assange be freed? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the biggest disappointments that I have with President Trump. I'm a supporter of President Trump, but when he was running in 2016, he said things about WikiLeaks and things that really just made you feel like, if this guy gets in, Julian's good to go. And he's the one that kind of got him arrested out of the embassy. And so I would love to see it, because I know there's a lot of people, and I don't know how your audience is, demographically, but there's a lot of people who support Trump and they still have hope that he's going to be the president in 2021. And hey, listen, I'm not going to argue that. If he's not, I would love for him to pardon Julian Assange and Edward Snowden. Both people, in my opinion, are patriots. They actually do the things that cowards can't do. We look at the last year. Listen, when people were saying defund the police, we're saying absolutely not. It's a stupid idea. We support our police. And then what we're seeing now is, as the pressure gets locked down, we're starting to see the human side of police at some points, where they're saying that they're actually going along with some really draconian rule, tyrannical things, because it's survival of the fittest. At some point, you have to say to the police, I'm assuming, say to themselves, it's me or them. It's my family or their family. And at the bottom line, I'm going to protect my family and do what I got to do. And that's why I think what we need to do is somehow, I don't know how, but somehow create a community, an environment, a resource that these police understand that if they say no to these tyrannical orders that they're being told to do, unconstitutional things, that there is something for them to fall back on, whether it's a GoFundMe fund that a percentage goes to any police officer losing his job because of it or whatever, or I don't know, but they need to understand that it's okay to make the right decision, because if you make the right decision, we're going to take care of you. But if they feel alone and in the dark, that's when the human side kicks in. And they're like, listen, I just got to take care of my family. I got a 2-year-old at home. I can't lose my house, Yeah. And so I told you I gab, I just go off. So
that's all right. Hey, let's switch gears for 1 second. Tell me about your equipment. How did you, what did you first start with? I noticed that you have some really high-end microphones right now. Yeah. Tell me about the equipment you started with. Tell me what you have now.
I started with, and I tell everybody to start with the same thing. A simple audio interface and a large diaphragm microphone works just fine. And so I started with the M Audio Nova, which they don't even make anymore. And I have like three of them now, and I think my brother has one because he produces for me now as well.
When you say an audio interface, explain that to people who don't know what that is.
It's essentially it's very simple. It's just a simple box that usually has one or two plug outlets for an actual microphone, and you put it in there, and on the back end there's a USB port that you plug a wire. It's a printer wire. Like if you have a printer at home, the same USB plug that you have for a printer plugs into the back of the audio interface, and then it plugs into the computer, and that connects the microphone to the audio interface, which powers the microphone. Sometimes it doesn't need to. And then from there goes into your computer. Now they do make microphones that have just the microphone, and the cord itself is USB, goes right into the computer, but you sometimes lose quality with that. And with the interface, you can control, mute. You have mute buttons, volumes for your microphone, volume for your headphones right there in front of you. And I don't know much about PCs. I've been working with Apple since 2005. When I was in college, I switched over. And with them, if you have a Mac, GarageBand, people like trashing GarageBand, like, oh, it's a free program that comes with Mac, it's no good. Listen, it's no good because you don't know how to use it. I do everything. Everything I do is on GarageBand. 98%. There's some other stuff I do off there, but everything is on GarageBand. It's a great program and it's free. But if you're on PC, another free program, and these are called DAWs, digital audio workstations. This is where you record, you edit, you chop the files up, you make your show. Another free one that I know is good for PCs is Audacity. And that when you open it up and you have no idea what you're looking at, it's going to look crazy complex, and you're going to be like almost defeated. You're like, oh my gosh, like I don't know what I'm doing. Like it looks a lot.
But it looks like a mixing board, pretty much.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And there's so much you can do with it. And so go on YouTube and you search how to use Audacity, and then you watch tutorials. If you don't know how to do something, go look it up and figure it out. But that's a good free thing. So I tell people who are starting podcasts, you don't need to spend an arm and a leg. If you're going to buy brand new equipment to start your show, go to Musician's Friend. And a lot of times musiciansfriend.com has bundle packs like clearance, sales. There's an audio interface, a microphone. They give you headphones, and sometimes they give you a couple other goodies and stuff for like $200, $300.
And that's an online store, Musician's Friend.
Yeah, okay. Musiciansfriend.com. Another one is sweetwater.com. These are audio stores that musicians use, and now obviously podcasters as well. So that's what I started out with. Just this.
So what about like brick and mortar? Would a place like Guitar Center or Sam Ash, do they have this kind of equipment as well? I mean, I'm the kind of guy, I got to see stuff and feel it.
Yeah.
And I'm always hesitant to order anything online. But do those brick and mortar stores also have this kind of equipment as well?
Absolutely. Sam Ash in King of Prussia. I just told everybody where the area we're in, but they definitely have stuff. I think it's called George's Music in Spring City. It's a small mom and pop store. They have things. I've never gotten anything from George's, but I have gone to Sam Ash. My initial microphone like this is a Shure SM7B microphone. I got from Sam Ash. The mixer board I have now, which is a Yamaha MG10XU, has 4 microphone channels, but I can actually fit 8 on here. I got that from Sam Ash. They have all that kind of stuff. They have audio interfaces. The thing is, when you go into these stores, know what you're looking for before you go in, because they're going to try selling you on it.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about being a podcaster and you're dealing with people in a store that probably aren't podcasters, they're musicians, they're not going to totally get exactly what you're looking for, or like they're going to try overselling, like, oh, you need this and it. Like they tried that with me. When I went in there, I was already an established podcaster and I knew what I wanted. And I went in there and they're like, oh, you need this. I'm like, no, I don't need that. I need this. And well, I don't know, that's a little too much. I'm like, I know exactly what I need. That's what I need. So give it to me, so know exactly what you want.
how much, let's say there's somebody who has a lot to say and they want to start a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
How much do they need to start a podcast? What is the bare minimum of what they need, and how much does it cost?
Free. It's free. It's absolutely free. If you got an iPhone, you can start podcasting. Smartphone. You can record. And here's the thing. If I tell people this as well, if you're starting a podcast, you do want to shoot for audio quality, because if you're a BSer and you really don't know what you're talking about and you have great audio quality, it's going to take people 3 episodes to figure that out. But if you have bad audio quality and you really have good content, they're not going to make it through an entire episode, because they're not going to be able to listen to it because it's just crap. But if you are starting out, I tell people, if you have zero money, use your phone. You can record files on your phone. And then there's a company that was bought by Spotify called Anchor. It's a podcast company where you upload your file and it broadcasts it to Apple, Spotify, all the different podcast playing apps. And they're free. You can make an account today and become a podcaster today for free. And they'll even have advertising opportunities for you right away, where you promote a product that is already there waiting for you to promote. And with those deals, it's more you promote it. If you sell something, you get a piece of it, kind of thing. Whereas like my promotions, I sign contracts where companies like Simply Safe, the contract says that we're going to pay you this amount of money for this amount of advertisements on this many episodes, mm-hmm. And so it's different in that sense. But essentially, you can podcast straight from your phone to Anchor for free, and the whole world can tune in to listen to your show for free. And so it's a great thing that the era that we live in with technology is amazing. So, yeah.
So somebody who says that they don't have enough money to start, that's just an excuse, isn't it?
Or ignorance. Maybe they just don't know. Like maybe they heard about somebody that has a podcast and they know what that person needs or uses, not needs, but uses. But yeah, I mean, it's really, it's not that expensive. And if you have just a little bit of money, you can go a long way. In fact, I know I mentioned a couple of times, but my friend Wes, when he started his podcast, him and his brother went down to the Goodwill and bought used USB mics for their podcast. And that's how they started. And when you go back and listen to his first episodes, they didn't sound that great as far as quality goes compared to now, but you start somewhere. And the thing is, you can use it as an excuse to not do something, but inaction is the worst thing you could ever do. Just go and do stuff, and I think people are afraid to fail a lot. And so they feel like they got to have their ducks in line in order to even start. And that's not how this works. You just go and you do things. If you go back on people's YouTube channels that you enjoy listening or watching their YouTube videos, and you go to the videos tab and you click their oldest videos, it's usually not the production you're used to, because everybody starts somewhere. It's very simplistic. It's a matter of having a vision of knowing where you want to go and just executing. Just go. You're going to mess up. I've made so many mistakes, tons. I probably made mistakes that I don't even know about, that I've lost tons of money. Maybe I could have been a full-time podcaster the same size as Rogan by now if I would have just made this one decision, but just can't be afraid to fail. What's that book called? Failing Forward, I think it's called. Yeah. Just learning how to take that step forward, and you're going to fail. Expect it. It's like skateboarding. You're going to fall. You're going to hurt yourself. Just get back up and do it again.
What kind of headphones are you using for your podcast?
Oh man, I forget. Oh yeah, these are Audio Technicas. I forget the model of these. I got these when I built this studio here, and they're great. What I did do was I took the ear pads off of them, the original ones, and I bought new ones that are thicker. And so the actual speakers of the earphones sit off my head more than the old ones, the originals, and it provides a more bass sound. And so it really kind of helps with the production side of things. But these are fantastic headphones. I absolutely love them. I have, I think, 3 of them in here. So yeah.
Nice. So, all right. So you fund the podcast through sponsors. They bid to be sponsors. Is that what it is?
Well, I have different ways I make income with the podcast. So as far as sponsors go, I host my show through a company called Audio Boom, which you can speaking of, starting podcasts, you can start with Audioboom for, I think it's $10 a month. Now, for a show my size, I never, when I went to them, I didn't have to pay anything. Like, they brought me on for free, and they opened up my show for advertising. So they have a whole sales staff that looks for advertising for my show. And they obviously take a percentage of it when they sell something. But as far as I know, there's not as much bidding as them using ad agencies to bring in advertising, but also going and actively searching. Like, they ask me sometimes, is there any companies that you would like to have sponsored the show that you think would work good with your audience? That's why I think I recently signed a contract for a year with Simply Safe. And I think
it's like a security system or something, right?
Yeah, home security. And I did them several times last year without a long-term contract like that. But I think what happened was people were using it with my promo code, because with what I talk about on the show, like, I mean, the year 2020 was a great advertising for food preparation and security. Why was everybody buying guns last year? Because they didn't feel safe. And so I talk to people about the fact that Simply Safe is something that you can actually do on your own. You don't need somebody to come to your house. You can do it in 30 minutes. And it was a real easy sell for the kind of content I talk about. Like, I talk about paranormal stuff, but I do go down the conspiracy hole sometimes. And my audience understands that I don't have a very positive look at the future right now with what we're going through. I think there's a lot of evil in this world, and they've been at work for a long time. And so it was a great opportunity for me. But yeah, they'll find advertising opportunities that work best for your audience, and it takes some time to get that traction going. Like, I'm still trying to get that traction going. Simply Say it's the first long-term contract I've signed. I would love to have 5 of those. That'd be amazing. So
that would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
All right. So there's paranormal, there's conspiracy. Paranormal would be more spirits, ghosts, this kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
The unexplained, tales of the unexplained. And then there's creatures. There's Bigfoot, there's Loch Ness Monster, there's Cthulhu, there's Chupacabra, like all this kind of stuff. That's a whole different category. That wouldn't be called paranormal, would it? Or is that?
Typically, no. I've conditioned my audience to understand that when I say paranormal, it's everything. Because even with Bigfoot, I mean, there's so much complexity to people's encounters that sometimes you wonder, is it more paranormal than physical? But the cryptids is what you're talking about. Bigfoot, Dogman, Chupacabra, these like beasts and animals that are just absurd to even think could exist. It's called cryptozoology, and that's that category.
Okay. I used to tune into Coast to Coast quite often back in the Art Bell days, and I used to love that stuff. And the people that listened, I think, what time does he start? Does he start at 11? Or he used to anyways. He start at 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning, I forget. And I remember driving whenever I had to do to make a drive back to New York from Philadelphia to go see family. I would always tune in late at night. I would leave very late at night, and then I would arrive at my parents' house and have coffee with my mother and father at 6 o'clock in the morning after driving all night. It was about a 5 to 6 hour drive. But I'll tell you what, listening to Coast really made my drive just went by so fast because it was so interesting. One night it was demonic possession. The next night was UFOs. The next night would be government conspiracies. Do you fall into that category where any of that stuff is game?
Yeah. In fact, the old school Art Bell listeners say that I'm like the Art Bell of podcasting. I've been compared that a lot. And so, I would say so. I never listened to Art Bell. That was kind of before my time. And when I started podcasting, he wasn't even on the radio, and then he came back on for a little bit before he died. I mean, people say that I sound a lot like Art Bell with how I do my show and the different content and stuff. I do it all. I mean, if it's weird, we're going to talk about it. I'm not scared to talk about it. I believe this world is far crazier than any of us can comprehend. And being a Christian, I believe that the supernatural is extremely real. And so why would people not experience it?
Right. Yeah. And then I remember George Norrie came on, and it took me a while to get used to him.
Yeah.
It was when I think about hosts of various shows, like even on TV, I think about like This Old House, and I was like a Bob Vila guy, and then Steve Thomas came on. It took me a long time to get used to Steve Thomas, and then there was the redhead guy. I don't know what his name was. If anyone knows what the host of that show's name, Kevin, was it? Kevin something? But I always liked Bob Vila and Norm Abrams. Like their banter was it. And then when they changed hosts, it was just so hard. When it went from Art Bell, when Coast to Coast went from Art Bell to George Norrie, I had such a hard time with that. I finally got used to him, but it took a while. Do you ever have any fill-in guests on, or do you just always, are you always the host? And when you say to always have 25 in the can, tell me what you mean by that, and how often? What is the frequency at which you publish your podcast?
Yeah, so I've never had somebody host the show for me. I have trust issues. I wouldn't let them. So, but yeah, I my goal was 25. I had gotten up to about 70 interviews waiting in wait. And now it's kind of dwindled because I have 2 kids now, and so my time is restrained. But typically, I interview on Saturdays for the Confessionals. Sometimes Friday nights, so like 9 o'clock, I'll do an interview, and then I book 2 to 3. Most of the time, it's 3 interviews on Saturdays: 1 at noon, 1 at 2 p.m., and 1 at 4 p.m. And I do those interviews, and then on Sundays, I do 2 interviews for Hammerling with my dad. And we release Hammerling Legends on Mondays, and usually we release at midnight. So as soon as the clock turns the next day, we're releasing most of the time. My brother produces Hammerling Legends, so sometimes he's a little behind because he doesn't have the motivation that I do. Call him out right there. But he does great. And then on Tuesdays, we release the Confessionals public show. And kind of backtracking to one of your previous questions about money and stuff. I also set up a website. Obviously, we have a website, but we put a paywall on the website where people can pay to be members, and they get an extra show every week. And so on Thursdays, I release a member show. So now I do 2 shows a week, and I'm starting to do some different things where I'll do a live show where I'll go live exclusively for the members, and we'll have a phone call in line where people can call in and talk. And then starting this week, actually, nobody knows this except for the people listening now. I'm on Tuesday's show for the first time. I'm releasing another page on my website for members called Overtime. And that's when I'm interviewing somebody, and I typically do about an hour of a show with people. That's typically how far I go for it. But then at the end of that hour, sometimes the person, we haven't gone through all the stories, or they're really hitting it out of the park, and we can go for another hour. Well, I'm going to call that overtime, and we put that second hour on the website then for the members. So lots of cool content there for people to check out. So yeah, 2 shows a week, interviews, lots of interviews. And I also produce other people's podcasts too. So if I'm not working on my shows, I produce other people's shows as well. So
nice. Let me ask you this. Let's talk about audience demographics and your subject demographics. Audience, male, female, age.
Well, male, female. In fact, I could probably look it up real quick instead of just thinking about it. But male, female, I know is more male than men or than women. And I think that I was just thinking about that today, actually, when I was doing some work. I was thinking, I wonder why we have about 60% men and 40% women. I wonder why that is. And sometimes I wonder, is it because I come across aggressive at times, and I think I might lose some people, but I'm okay with that because I'd rather be myself than be trapped in a prison of this idea of what I want people to think I am, Yeah. And so I think sometimes I come across aggressive, and I think men typically relate with that more, at least the men that still exist today. But yeah, so as far as the age groups go, it's loading here, but I think the age groups, typically my biggest age group is I think it's 35 to 45, believe it or not. And I thought I would be more along the lines of like 25 to 35 kind of age group where it's the most. But yeah, 35 to 45 typically is the highest percentage of people listening, and the lowest is the 18 to 25. Which, I play more younger type music on the show as far as like the intro and the outro. I thought kids would like that these days, but apparently not. I'm still the old guy. Yeah. It's funny, George. It's funny, man. I'm 35 years old. I don't think I'm old. But when I talk to kids at work who work the dock and they're in their early 20s and they're listening to like the new hip hop and stuff, I'm like, this music sucks, guys. And they're like, well, what do you like? And I'm like, well, I mean, I like hip hop, but you know, Eminem, 50 Cent. And they're like, oh, that's old school. I'm like, is it old school? Like, come on, guys, give me a break. But yeah, so I mean, but I have a pretty well balanced listening audience for the most part, and I have people in their 65 plus range that listen to the shows, and so I'm pretty happy with it.
Nice. Let's talk about the subject demographics. When you have guests on, do you have more men on or more women on, and what are the ages?
Well, in the beginning of the show, I had more men because that's who wanted to come on the show, and I remember specifically because I used to look at this stuff. I don't look at it anymore. Anybody who wants to podcast, do yourself a favor. Don't ever get caught up in looking at your reviews on iTunes. And I remember the one review said, definitely a male chauvinist because he has not interviewed one single woman. It was like episode 15. And I'm like, what? You know, and since then, obviously it's balanced out because listen, paranormal stuff happens to ladies too. And they come on the show and there's weeks that I think there's sometimes I go 2-3 weeks where I have 2 shows a week and they're all women. And so, you know, it's a very balanced thing with that perspective. But it's just funny how people, they get an hour of you. Like we're on this for an hour now. And so people tuning in, they get an hour of me, an hour of you, George. And from that, especially if they're just passing by, they draw conclusions as to who we are. And they assume about us. And the reality is we're complex human beings like every other person. And there's no way you could possibly understand who we are. And so to label somebody as a male chauvinist or something like that I hate women is clearly a you problem, not a me problem. You know what I mean? And it's also a reflection of the world we live in today.
Let's talk about some of the topics. I like to leave things open-ended. You know, I'll say something, oh, that's fake. Or is it?
Yeah.
You know, what is the weirdest thing, the weirdest guest you've ever had on the show? Most far out where even you had to like bend your mind a little bit.
Yeah.
To wrap your brain around that topic.
There's a guy that I sat down to do an interview with because I real quick, I changed my habits in the beginning. I used to call people before I interview with them to hear their story, then we redo it. But I found real quick that people telling the story to the same person twice, the second time it's not as good as the first time. They leave out details. And so I call this guy and I sit down to do an interview with him. And he tells me he has a Bigfoot experience. He's a truck driver and he saw this thing on the side of the road. I'm like, all right, cool. Let's talk. And he tells me the story. And then as you thought he was winding it down, he's like, and then there was another time, and he goes on to talk about this other time that he was driving down the road, saw this Bigfoot. And I'm not kidding you, Jordan. And I'm a new podcaster. So like nowadays, if I know the show's not going to air, I pull the plug quick. I'm just like, this isn't going to work, you know, or if I like the person, I'll still talk to him and stuff, but knowing that it's not going to air. This guy went on for about an hour and a half about countless. He probably had at least a dozen Bigfoot encounters, all while he was driving his truck all over the country. They were all on the side of the road for him. And then the last one was a dog man jumped over his tractor trailer one night and chased his truck down the road. And I was just like, oh, guy, I don't know. Do you have friends? I mean, do you need somebody to talk to? Like, I just didn't understand why you're making this up and all that stuff. Like, it was just clearly, but you know, there have been times where I read an email and I'm intrigued by it. I don't know how it's going to go. And I'm thinking we're going to get a little weird, and all of a sudden, and it starts getting weird. And then all of a sudden, like, it just, the story gets so detailed, and I'm just like taking in. I'm like, whoa, is this whoa, you know? And all of a sudden, like, you have this experience where you go in to sit down with the interview and it's just a normal day, and all of a sudden it's like, boom, mind blown. And that happens sometimes. And that's probably one of the motivations that keep me moving forward. I love that feeling when I'm just sitting, like, we're not usually doing it on video for my show. It's usually audio. And so when they're talking, my microphone's muted and they're blowing my mind. I'm sitting back like this. I'm like, just like, You got to be kidding me. And so I get some of those. Episode 122 was one of those. It was just a mind. It was by far
episode 122. So everyone has to look at listen to episode 122. Where do you draw the line between crazy and I swear that I experienced this thing? Like, do you ever write someone off in your? Do you ever say in your head, this person is definitely nuts, or do you really believe what they say? How do you get? People are telling you some pretty crazy things on the Confessionals podcast, which is at the confessionalspodcast.com.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so the way I view all this stuff is I don't need to agree with how you view your experience for me to believe you had an experience. And so when I walk away from an interview, if I feel like that person actually had an experience, I don't need to agree with how they view that experience, because I always use this example, George. If you have a priest and an atheist walk into a room together, a haunted house, and they spend the night there and they have crazy experiences, they're going to walk out the next day describing those experiences extremely differently, because one is a theistic person that believes in a higher power, and another one believes that there is no higher power. So how do they describe these things is going to be completely different. And so you have to understand that doing what I do, where you have people all over the world contacting you about their paranormal experiences, they have their own worldviews going into the experience that shape and mold that experience for them. And so if they're a witch, they're going to attribute some of the things that they went through extremely different than somebody like me as a Christian. And so when I listen to people's stories, I'm just in the mode of, do I believe you had this experience? You're not BSing me. I don't care how you believe that experience, what you believe that experience was, as much as it is, I just need to know. I just need to feel comfortable with you telling me something that you believe happened to you, or that you did go through. Just, we might define it differently.
Many years ago, I was living in a town in Bucks County, and every town has its ghost stories. Every town has its ghost stories. Back in the, I guess it was maybe 2007, I went to Gettysburg, a known ghost town, so to speak. Yeah. And I said to the guy at the Gettysburg Hotel where I was staying, true story, I leaned over and I said, are there really ghosts here in Gettysburg? And this was a older guy working the desk at the hotel. And he says to me, he literally, this is what he does. He goes, he leans over to me and says, you know what? There were never any ghosts in this town until that guy wrote that book. And the book called The Ghosts of Gettysburg. And then all of a sudden, all the paranormal people were there with their instruments, measuring electrical activity and all this kind of stuff. And the weekend that I was there, it was a Halloween weekend. So everybody was dressed up I spent 3 days there. It was kind of funny. And that was another thing I had said to him. I said, oh, this is cool where everyone's like dressed up. And he says, this is Gettysburg. They dress up every week out of the year. Like all the Civil War reenactors, the women in the hoop skirts and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. The place is just known for its costumes. And on Halloween, it's just another night. Yeah. And what was fascinating was there was one room. I'm trying to think of the, it was like room 317. Room 317, where there was noted paranormal activity. Ghosts going through walls and doors and this kind of stuff in room 317. Literally, my first night in the Gettysburg Hotel, first night, I hear pounding. And, you're in a hotel, and if you hear pounding, it could be, your neighbors getting very romantic or something like that, So that's always a possibility. And I thought maybe that's what it was. But it sounded like somebody was getting murdered. I heard it sounded like somebody was getting beaten to death with a hammer. And the screams, it wasn't just like a woman moaning sexually. It was like someone terrified because they were getting murdered. Okay. I sat up in my bed, looked over at the clock, and it said 317.
Mm.
True story.
And that's the witching hour too. 3 o'clock in the morning is known as the witching hour, where spirits are most active.
Holy cow. And, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's one of my stories.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, when I talk to people, I've really learned that once people find out what I do, I think a lot of people have crazy experiences. They just don't have anybody to talk to. I can't tell you how many times guys at work that I drive truck with, they're like, let me tell you what I had experience with. The funny story, George, I'm at work, because I first started with the Bigfoot stuff. I didn't have a podcast. I was just a YouTube guy, Facebook, Bigfoot, and everybody made fun of me for it. We were talking about Bigfoot one night, and there was a driver, and he was getting ready to go out for the night. I had just come back in, and we're all talking about 5 to 6 of us. And he's like, yeah, I don't think there's no such thing as Bigfoot. Okay. That's cool. And like I said earlier, the group that I started, Pennsylvania Sasquatch Research, like I was really looking into the idea of this thing being in Pennsylvania, which Pennsylvania is one of the most hottest states for those sightings in the country. And so, okay. And he said, but I'll tell you one thing that I did see weird one night. And I said, what's that? And he said, him and his friends, when he was a teenager, were driving through State College out in the middle of nowhere. If you're familiar with Pennsylvania State College, it's nothing. If you're not on the campus, there ain't nothing out there. And he said they were driving through this road. It was dark out. And he said, all of a sudden, this monkey ran across the road. And I looked at him. I said, are you sure it was a monkey? And he's like, what else could it have been? And I said, well, we're talking about Bigfoot here. You ever think that maybe that was what you saw? And he said, well, it wasn't the size of a Bigfoot. And I said, well, you think Bigfoot are born 10 feet tall? Like these things are, they're not, this isn't just, people are seeing Patty, right? The Patterson-Gimlin film that was shot in California in 1967. You see that Bigfoot on video, and that's what people think. If Bigfoot's real, it's just one, and it's out on the West Coast. Like, I talked to Dr. Meldrum, who is on the History Channel talking about these things. He's a specialist with foot casts, and he's a professor, I think, Iowa State University. And he estimates that in his state alone, there's probably about a population of, I think he said, 350 to 500 of them in his state alone. And if you think about like grand scheme, I mean, that's not a lot, but it's still way more. But my point in saying that is, well, these things procreate. I mean, they have babies and they raise them, and it's just very interesting. Once you get into this topic, it sucks you in if you're into it, and you can go down the rabbit hole, which I've found new levels to the rabbit hole. I've tried going back up, but I just can't. It's a lost cause now.
Yeah. I guess if you just give somebody a safe place to tell their story, where they know they're not going to be mocked, because they're probably thinking, oh, this guy's going to think I'm nuts. If you just be very, like, for instance, when I used to listen to Art Bell and George Norrie, they were so kind and so gracious to people who were telling the most far out stories that I've ever, and asking very serious questions about what they saw in details. So it definitely takes a certain kind of personality, I think, to interview people without laughing at them. I don't know. I might end up laughing in someone's face. There's the YouTube video. Did you ever see the YouTube video of the dude who has the really super high voice, and he was on a talk show, and he's getting interviewed, and the host of the talk show says, well, tell us about your experience. And the guy's, well, when I like this, and then the host of the show just goes, like, he wasn't aware that man had this super high pitched voice.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely hilarious. So I think you got to be a special person to be able to talk to people who already think that you're going to think they're crazy. So I think that's kind of a special gift. Definitely.
Well, and also the way I approach my show. So be educated, be entertained, be inspired. Those are the 3 things that I want to hit with my show. So if I put out an episode, one of those things has to be hit on every episode. But the entertaining part is a very big thing. I know people are tuning in to be entertained. And so I typically start a podcast episode very lighthearted. When I start sitting down with an interview, like say it's you, George, I'm like, hey, George, how you doing? And he's doing good. So, let's talk about this experience you had. And it's real lighthearted, and and I let them dictate the pace of this whole thing. And so sometimes people are very just jovial and just lighthearted and like, this is what happened to me. It's crazy, but this is what happened to me. And that's when, you have more of a green light to, make some jokes. I've said some jokes to people and stuff and had them rolling on the show about their experience and stuff, because sometimes it's just funny. But then, I've had other things where this one lady on episode 175, she's crying about her experience. Like, people are breaking down crying. And so like, then the transition happens, and you're taking it more serious. Yeah. But sometimes people just they say things and you just laugh, and just if you're just yourself, your authentic self, and people understand that you're just a fun guy, you're just being you, and you're just having a conversation. That's what I started trying to transition the way I describe what I do. I don't really interview. I have conversations with people. I'm not a journalist. I don't have preset questions. I literally hit record and we have a conversation and see where it goes. And with that kind of environment, you just have some fun. And that's why I try to tell people, listen, just relax. We're having fun. We're having a conversation. We're going to see where it goes. And also as the host though, I mean, sometimes you can tell just somebody that you're talking to, they don't have the funny bone in their body. They're not interested in laughing with you. So you refrain from, goofing around and stuff. But I try to goof around on my show and just, have some fun. I want people to smile.
What about guests from abroad? Now, obviously, you must have an international audience.
Yeah.
Is there a Bigfoot of Germany? Is there a chupacabra of Saudi Arabia? I'm sure every country has its myths and legends. Yeah. Give me an example of something that's not in North America.
Well, you brought up Bigfoot, and that's something that's seen all over the world, and it's just called different names. In Australia, I have, I think outside of the United States and Canada, Australia is my biggest abroad listening audience. And what they call it the Yowie. And
Yowie.
Yeah, the Yowie.
Okay.
Yowie.
Okay.
And it's a Bigfoot. I'm sorry. Like that's what they're describing, they're seeing, but it's just in a different location of the globe. That's something that pops up in Russia. The Himalayas have the Yeti, and for the longest time, I'm not even going to attempt to describe it because I'm going to butcher it. But I mentioned Dr. Meldrum earlier that I just had a conversation with him maybe 2 months ago, and he told me that the Yeti was not a Bigfoot. It was something totally different, and as a doctor analyzing foot casts and stuff, I guess he could tell, but I was in the assumption that what people were describing was a Bigfoot just in the Himalayas, because what they describe sounds like a Bigfoot, but he was adamant. He said it's not a Bigfoot. It is something completely different. And so I found that fascinating, because then there's at least two giant monster type things walking this earth that we tend to overlook. We can't keep up with these things. It's absolutely fascinating. You find tracks. I found tracks, and it's a thrilling thing, but to actually see one of these things, it's next to impossible. It's like, unless they want you to see them, you're not going to see it. And it's amazing.
I love it. Well, a great conversation. It's interesting. My interviews, when I've done one-to-one things like this, everything changed when I went from interview to conversation. So when I talk to people, I like to say that I want the listeners feel like that they're eavesdropping on a conversation between two friends. And that's exactly what we did here.
Yeah.
But one of the neat things, how I titled this show tonight, was, the Confessionals Podcast with Tony Merkel, episode 001, which means there's going to be a 002 and a 003. And I would love to have you on again. I took a step of faith because I didn't check with you first. But would you come back and do an episode 002 with me?
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, yeah, I've been waiting all my life for this, George. I'm excited.
This is great. How can people find you?
All right. So theconfessionalspodcast.com is my website for my show. You can search the show on any podcast playing app. Just type in The Confessionals and you'll find it there. And we're on all social medias. You can find our other podcast, Hammer Lane Legends, where it's just me and my dad, truck drivers, and he's in studio with me, and we're talking to somebody about their wild experiences from the road. That's Hammer Lane Legends. And again, Rage Against Dystopia is a new Instagram page that I just started about a month ago. I have over 100 posts in there, and it's me literally seeing the world around me, seeing what these politicians are doing, these leaders of the world, and what they're telling us, and projecting that into what's coming down the road. I'm more of a futurist than I am even a conspiracy theorist. I like taking the environment I live in and really projecting where this is all going. And that's the whole emphasis behind that page, where people can, if I post it in there, it's because I believe that has a role, even if it's 1% of whatever. I believe it has a role of where we're going in the future. And I actually might turn that into another show, Rage Against Dystopia. I like the name. And if the page gets enough traction, maybe I'll start doing a show strictly for, conspiratorial, futurist, dystopian type content.
Love it. So if there are people who have had paranormal experiences, strange zoological experiences, if they want to reach out to you, people watching this interview, how can people reach you to share their story on your podcast?
Two different ways. I did, well, there's three technically, but I typically tell people don't DM me on social media because I'm bad with checking it, and my wife has enough on her plate. The best way to contact us is email the show. It's easy to remember. It's a long email, but it's easy. theconfessionals@theconfessionalspodcast.com. That's theconfessionals@theconfessionalspodcast.com. Or if you just go to the website, theconfessionalspodcast.com, there's a contact section. And right in there, you can email us straight from the website itself. Either way goes right to us, and we'll definitely see it, and we'll get in touch with you. My wife, like I said, she handles my emails. She's great at it. Before, I was months behind on emails, and now she's up to date. And she always brags whenever she calls it the inbox zero. She has no inbox messages. She's taking care of everything. She brags about it. It doesn't happen often because the emails come in like crazy, but she loves just getting that inbox to zero. So we'll definitely get to you.
Nice. I like that. Well, thanks for responding to a last minute text.
Absolutely.
And, you were so into it, and I had time, and I dusted off my old microphone from 2009 and my headphones from 2005, and I thought this was a good time to bring them out. And let's talk about some time when we're going to do it again.
Yes.
And interesting guests. And I'm excited about this. I mean, I like the confessionals. I think it's a great topic. I think it's something that people are interested in. It makes people think beyond their everyday reality.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it expands the mind.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. I mean, we can get so caught up in you get so caught up in life that you don't always comprehend the fact that reality is far more complex than you could possibly imagine. And if just one of the things that you hear on my show is true, literally just one, then that means everything you thought reality goes out the window, and you need to start thinking about what the possibilities are. And that's the goal of my show, is to get people to think outside the box. We're so used to letting other people think for us and tell us what to believe and what to think. I encourage people to think outside the box, unplug from the mainstream propaganda, and really start thinking for yourself. And if you do that, 3 months later, you're going to find you think completely different than you used to, and you're going to object to a lot of things that you used to really believe that people are telling you to believe. So, yeah.
Tony Merkel from the Confessionalspodcast.com. Everything you need to know at his website. Thank you for joining me tonight, Tony. I appreciate it, and I look forward to the next time we get together.
All right, brother. Thanks.